I'm Wendy Kramers. I teach at Shoemaker Elementary, 3rd grade, and this is my 14th year. I have 20 kids, pretty good mix of boys and girls, lots of range of abilities, lots of range of learning styles. So we've been working on looking at organisms of traits and how those traits affect their survival. So today they're going to get a new challenge from the lead engineer. They are taking on roles of biomimicry engineers, and so their challenge today is to design a solution to a problem that they are seeing in an environment where there are invasive plants. So we're going to be working in groups for part of the lesson where they're going to be bouncing ideas off of each other, getting some background knowledge and making sure they have the information they need to really have a solid plan moving forward. And then they'll be put into partners. They'll do a little bit further seeking of information and then actually start planning and designing their solutions.
So it's going to be an exciting day for us. I know we have waited a while to be able to actually make a solution to something, so today's the day. But before we get started, I have a little bit of information I need to make sure that I give you so we can have a good plan for our day. So first of all, our target for today is I can solve a problem in nature by using the design cycle. So we're going to go back to the design cycle again today and use that to help us solve a problem in nature. And the other thing I want to be thinking about today is what our focus is for this chapter. So how can engineers use what they learn from organisms' traits to design solutions? So we're thinking about what have we learned about organisms' traits, and how can we use that to design solutions for problems? That's what biomimicry engineers do, right? So that is our job today. Anybody feel really confident in something we've learned so far or has a good example of how engineers can use what they've learned from organisms' traits to help them design solutions to real-world problems?
Well, we were talking about how if they don't have adaptive traits for their environment, they're less likely to survive.
Okay, so we could look, an engineer, a biomimicry engineer could observe those traits and what traits they have, what adaptive traits they have that help them survive, and maybe use those ideas to help them design a solution to a problem. We need you to help us design a robot that can pull up invasive plants and grind them up so they don't harm the environments in which they were planted. We are calling this robot the robo-grazer.
So when we are designing solutions to problems and working through engineering, we really use 4 different phases of the design cycle. So we learn, and we plan, and we make, and we test.
You think about our design cycle, the first part is learning, right? So before we can use what we know about traits of giraffes and the structure and function of those traits, is we have to learn about it a little bit. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to come up with a very good design, right? So that's going to be the first thing we're going to need to do. I also need to show you, so if you noticed in the note from the lead engineer, they talked about invasive plants. And all over the world, you can find invasive plants that really aren't helping out the environment that they're in. They're causing some problems. And we're even going today during our wind time talk about some Nebraska invasive plants and how they, right here in our own environment where we're living, we have some problems with invasive plants too. But for today, here's your example of an invasive plant that you're going to need to know about that's going to help you figure out why we need this robo-grazer. So what you're going to do is I'm going to have you do partner 1 and partner 2. And you guys are going to have to read a little bit of information about giraffes and about their neck structure. Okay, and I want you to be thinking about how could we use this in our design. Did you guys talk about a plan of how you could use the structure and function of the giraffe neck to help you come up with a design? What were some ideas that you guys have?
We have almost the same neck as us, and they use some stronger muscle in it.
So what's the function of the muscles? What do they do?
They help them grow their head.
Okay,
So then the head does not so it's like way too
okay, right? You have to support the head. You have to have that strong base, right? So when you're designing your solution, you're going to think about, okay, how do I make a strong base, and then how do I represent the bone and the muscle in my solution, so that way I can use what I know from what works well for the giraffe in my design, right? Ella, what did you and your partner talk about?
that the bone, it supports the neck and the head, so like the head doesn't just fall off or something.
Okay, you have to support it somehow, right? Yep. So when you looked at the bone, you realized, okay, this is there to support it. So when you're designing your solution, whatever materials you use, you know that they need to be strong to support, right? Good. You guys have a great plan going so far. Don't forget to label those parts, because if you're a real biomimicry engineer, you would make sure you labeled all those things so anybody that read your design would know what you were trying to represent, okay? So when we are engineering or we're designing a solution to a problem, we take those 4 parts and we go through the different phases, and sometimes you go back from one phase to another, but we initially start with learning, where they get the information they need to really understand how can I use this information to solve the problem. Then they make their plan. And so sometimes that's a sketch, sometimes it's a diagram, sometimes it's a model, just depends on the activity. And then after they plan it, they make it, and that can be with any sort of materials, whatever you have for whatever the lesson may be. And in this case, it was the straws and the pipe cleaners and all of those things. And then we also revise our plan too. So we test it and then we revise. And so that's also kind of built into that plan too. So you probably need to go a little bit further, right?
But then after that we finish this, we're thinking about like putting 2 craft sticks, and then once we get like to like right here, put the thinner ones.
Okay, and why do you want to put the thinner ones?
Put the thicker ones at the bottom to keep it like stable.
Okay, so you have that good strong base.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then once it gets up more, it gets like less heavier and all that, so it like can bend down easier.
Good, great ideas.
I want to share out with some other teams some ideas we have come up with, because we're inspired by the traits of the giraffe and the structure and function of the giraffe's neck, but we also can be inspired by others, right?
So we are like having craft sticks, and we're gonna tape the craft sticks together to make the bone, and then
We're gonna add a pipe cleaner.
and then we're also gonna add a straw as the head, but we're not gonna use the bendy part because then it'll make our it'll make our thing bend too much.
They had some really good conversations about, like, for example, one student said to another, well, I don't think that's going to work because it's just going to, flop over if we use that pipe cleaner. And then the other one said, well, how are we going to make it stronger? And so I felt like they were really trying to use each other to help come up with good solutions. And they were very positive in the way they were doing it. And I felt like I just heard really good conversations about, how the traits of the giraffe were really inspiring their designs, which is what the goal was. I really wanted them to keep focusing back on, here's the structure and function of the giraffe, and how does this inspire my design, like a real biomimicry engineer. So I heard some great conversations.
A similarity I noticed between both of their designs was they used a craft stick for that stability, right? Like the bone to provide strength. So there's going to be some similarities in our designs, but there's also going to be differences because we all have our own unique ways of solving problems. All right, do you guys feel like you have a pretty good plan moving forward? And tomorrow we'll be able to actually test out these designs and see if they meet the criteria and if we can actually solve the problem. I will tell you that after we're done testing, we're going to send this information to the lead engineer, and you are going to have to present to them your design solutions and be able to use evidence to support your design.
Well, overall, I feel like they did a really good job. They did a good job of taking what they learned about the structure and function of the giraffe neck and really trying to use the materials they had to come up with a good plan that would work. And they went for it. They weren't afraid to just try it and see what happened. So I feel like that part went really well too. So tomorrow they will finish making their designs, and then they'll have an opportunity to test them. And so what they'll do is they'll take their design, and I'll time them for 30 seconds, trying to reach all 40 leaves, starting from the bottom and working their way up, and we'll record that data. And we'll do 2 tests. Then after they're done with those 2 tests, they have an opportunity to revise. So they might realize some things weren't working so well, and after they revise, we'll test again. And so we'll just collect all of this data, and at the very end of the unit is where they report it out to their lead engineer, and they'll report that data to them to show how they improve their design and how it better meets their criteria now. Really, kids have to, first of all, get comfortable in your classroom and with each other. And once you build that relationship where they know that they can share freely and that their ideas, every idea is a good idea, even if it doesn't turn out to be the right idea, that I feel like is the most important thing in the beginning, is getting them to just be comfortable to share.
So you've heard this three-dimensionality of science now, of our standards. So we have our science and engineering practices, the things that scientists do. We have our disciplinary core ideas. That's the science, what we need, what we know and understand. And then we have those cross-cutting concepts that are the connector. They are a way for students to think as they approach problems. They're a way of students to make sense by connecting, again, maybe a life science topic to a physical science topic. There are also those overarching ideas that carry over into their language arts, into social studies, cause and effect, patterns, structure and function. And so they're those big ideas that help students make connections and give them a way to think through things.
So in the past, I felt like it was very surface level understanding. I could give them some information and they could, knowledge retrieval, just, give me the answer back. And that was really it. And yeah, they had a general understanding, but could they critically think? Could they apply that to another situation? Probably not. And I feel like now, because they have to work through it and they have that productive struggle where I don't jump in and rescue them. I give them the information they need, and then they have to think it through, and they have to really use those, engineering practices to get them through and to process the material. And I feel like they just do a lot better job of developing a deeper understanding than they did in previous years and before the new standards.
As a science teacher at heart, as I always will be, it is so exciting. You saw the students get excited today, and it's so exciting to see them love what they're doing, love learning. It's great to see students talk like, think like, act like scientists. It is so much more authentic now, and we're seeing a lot of great things even from our youngest little kinders all the way through high school.